All praise, glory, and honor is most certainly due to the Most High, the God of the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And peace to you in the name of Jesus. This is your brother Elisha Israel of the household of faith. I count it truly a blessing each and every single time that I can come before you to preach the word of God. And never do I count it as a light thing to do so. All right, brothers and sisters. Coming on a little late, not a little late, really late this evening. Title of today's lesson is Kingdoms Come and Kingdoms Go. You know, it's one thing about it. Oftentimes, I guess when we live in the midst of something, we think that things will never change until they actually do. And so it is with kingdoms. Kingdoms, you know, they rise and they set like the sun. But one thing is for certain is that God is in control. And just to show you that, I want to show you through the scriptures, because when it's all said and done, all these kingdoms of man will come and go, and then a kingdom that shall never be destroyed will be established. So this is kingdoms go and kingdoms come. Kingdoms come and kingdoms go, excuse me. Genesis, the 15th chapter and verse 7. It says, and he said unto them, I am the Lord that brought thee out of Ur of the Chaldees to give thee this land to inherit it. And he said, Lord God, whereby shall I know that I shall inherit it? Okay, so now this is Abraham talking to the Most High here. The covenant is renewed. He says, and he said unto him, take me a heifer of 3 years old, and a she-goat of 3 years old, and a ram of 3 years old, and a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. And he took unto him all these, and divided them in the midst, and laid each piece one against another. But the birds divided he not, and when the fowls came down upon the carcasses, Abram drove them away. And when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and lo, an horror of great darkness fell upon him. And he said unto Abram, know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them there, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. So just so we know who this is referring to, let's go to Exodus, the 12th chapter. Exodus, the 12th chapter and verse 40. Because here we read in Genesis 15 that his seed was going to be enslaved. Now this is Exodus, and they were being enslaved for 400 years. Exodus, the 12th chapter and verse 40. It says, now the sojourning of the children of Israel who dwelt in Egypt was 430 years. And it came to pass at the end of the 430 years, even the selfsame day it came to pass, that all the hosts of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. So after that 400-year period, and they left out of the land of Egypt. Now let's go to back to Genesis, the 15th chapter, verse 14. It says, and also that nation whom they shall serve will I judge, and afterward shall they come out with great substance. Thou shalt go to thy fathers in peace. Thou shalt be buried in a good old age. But in the 4th generation they shall come hither again. Then he says something, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. That's one thing about it. The Lord will give kingdom space. You saw it with Jonah when he went to Nineveh. After the warning, they had space, and eventually they succumbed because they went astray. But, you know, there's a cup of iniquity that he has. It's at a certain point to where a people, or even an individual, was seeing so much that the Lord brings forth judgment. Let's go to Deuteronomy 7 chapter, because here he said he didn't allow things to happen just at that moment, or even in the very near future. He said, even when Israel was established, he said, but in the 4th generation they shall come hither again, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. And that's another thing. The Most High's time span and ours is totally different. 400 years is nothing to an eternal being, but for us it seems like a long time. Just like how this nation came into its prominence, the sun was set on this nation as well, as far as being an empire or being powerful. This is Deuteronomy, the 7th chapter and verse 1. It says, when the Lord thy God shall bring thee into the land whither thou goest to possess it. Now this is Moses, and Israel has come out of the land, and he says, listen, when the Lord thy God shall bring thee into the land whither thou goest to possess it, and have cast out many nations before thee. So now here, what Abraham, with a covenant that was renewed, was pointing to is going to be they're still in the wilderness at that time, but they're going to be brought into a land, but people are already living in the land. So that's another thing. You know, the Lord could say, hey, you don't have this land. But then they had to go in and take the land. That's the thing. So you have to take part in your own deliverance. You have to take part in your own victory. He split the Red Sea. They had to walk through it. Nevertheless, he says, when the Lord thy God shall bring thee into the land whither thou goest to possess it, and hath cast out many nations before thee. Listen to the nations. The Hittites and the Girgashites and the Amorites and the Canaanites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites, 7 nations greater and mightier than thou. But what was one of those nations? The Amorites. We read about the Amorites in Genesis, the 15th chapter. See, kingdoms come and kingdoms go. He will displace nations. Okay, let's look at an example here. Let's go to Daniel, the 5th chapter. Daniel, the 5th chapter, and we want to pick it up at verse 1. Daniel, the 5th chapter and verse 1, because here we have this Belshazzar, right, who is king. And this is after the nation of Israel, their kingdom has been toppled by the Babylonians. This is Daniel 5 and verse 1. It says, Belshazzar the king made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords and drank wine before the 1,000. Belshazzar, whilst he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple, which was in Jerusalem, that the king and his princes, his wives and his concubines might drink therein. See, that's one thing about it. How did the vessels of the temple come into his possession? Well, when Israel sinned and continued to sin some more, the cup of iniquity reached its brim upon them, and then judgment came in the form of Nebuchadnezzar in the Babylonian invasion of 586 BC. In 722, the Assyrian invasion had already taken place, where the 10 tribes were dispersed. Okay, so that's how, and that shows the justice of God, even what he would do to us all after they continued to sin. So it says in verse 3, then they brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of God, which was at Jerusalem, and the king and his princes, his wives and his concubines drank in them. So they're having a good time. They drank wine and praised the God of gold, gods of gold and of silver, of brass, of iron, of wood, and of stone. Now they've taken what was put in place to in honor and in the service to the true and living God, and now they're taking these things and drank to false gods in the same hour. So we should understand that judgment is coming for this. In the same hour came forth the fingers of a man's hand and wrote over against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace, and the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. So now you just out there drinking, and then you just see this hand, right, and it's writing. So you would be scared, as was the king. It says, then the king's countenance was changed, and his thoughts troubled him. So you can have all the power you think amongst men, but there's another realm where power you really haven't a clue about. That spiritual realm that controls things, and is not confined to the things within the physical realm. That spiritual realm. So he saw a hand just right. Said, then the king's countenance was changed, and his thoughts troubled him. Now he's put something on his mind. It says, so that the joints of his loins were loosed, and his knees smote one against another. So now you need one to interpret what's written. Okay, so now he's told by the queen about Daniel. This is Daniel, the 5th chapter and verse 17. It says, then Daniel answered and said before the king, let thy gifts be to thyself. Actually, let thy gifts be to thyself, and give thy rewards to another. Because he promised to listen. Hey, if you can interpret this thing, he said, I'll give you riches. He said, man, keep it. You understand why as we continue to read. He says, yet I will read the writing unto the king and make known to him the interpretation. O thou king, the most high God gave Nebuchadnezzar thy father a kingdom and majesty and glory and honor. And for the majesty, listen to what he said, the most high gave it to him. See, oftentimes we think things are just simply by our might when, again, the Lord, he even called Nebuchadnezzar at one point his servant. Why? Because he was serving him in his righteous capacity. He was serving him in the service of bringing forth judgment. So it says, and for the majesty that he gave him, all people, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. Whom he slew, and whom he kept alive, and whom he set up, and whom he put down. Listen to this. It says, but when his heart was lifted up and his mind hardened in pride, he was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. So now again, so he reigns. Why? Because the Most High allowed it to be. It said, but when his heart was lifted up and his mind hardened in pride, he was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. And he was driven from the sons of men, and his heart was made like the beast. He was out there, had lost his mind. He was out there in the field like a beast. His nails growing, hair growing, the wet of the dew on him. He had lost his mind. Why? Because he thought it was by his power. He was driven from the sons of men, and his heart was made like the beast, and his dwelling was with the wild asses. They fed him with grass like oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till he knew that the Most High God ruled in the kingdom of men, and that he appointed over it whomsoever he will. See, he does what he wants to do, and he will allow these to reign. But kingdoms come and kingdoms go. Verse 25. It says, and this is the writing that was written, many tekel upharsin. That is the interpretation of the thing. Many, God hath numbered that kingdom and finished it. And all kingdoms ultimately come to an end. But here, Belshazzar is being told about his kingdom. It says, Tekel, thou art weighed in the balances and art found wanting. Peres, thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Then commanded Belshazzar, and they clothed Daniel with scarlet and put a chain of gold about his neck and made a proclamation concerning him that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. So now they made all these proclamations, and well, are you paying attention to the prophecy? He said, you finished. Verse 30, and that night was Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, slain, and Darius the Median took the kingdom, being about 62 years old. Now let's verify this with history. This is the Zondervan Pictorial Bible Dictionary. I want to pick it up at page 164. Page 164. Excuse me, not 164. Excuse me. Page 104. It says, for many years, this is under Belshazzar, for many years regarded as a fictitious literary creation of a post-captivity author, assuming the nom de plume of Daniel, 165 BC. See, that's one thing about the Bible. Oftentimes people, because they didn't have the evidence, they made all these assumptions about the Bible not being real, and then they did a little bit more digging, a little bit more archaeology, and they found, oh, here it is. So they thought this was a fictional character. So it says, it is now well authenticated through archaeological studies that Belshazzar was an historic personage. In the 5th chapter of Daniel, he is referred to as the son of Nebuchadnezzar. This is in conformity to general Semitic usage, where one's descendant is frequently referred to as his son. Nebuchadnezzar died in 562 BC after a 42-year reign, and was followed in quick succession by Marduk, the evil Marduk of Jeremiah 52 and 31, and 2 Kings 25 and 27. He was replaced by Nergal-Usar, who reigned from 560 to 556 BC. He was succeeded by Labish-Marduk, his weak son, who reigned but a few months and then was overthrown by revolution. One of the conspirators, Nabonidus, now ascended the throne. Though a revolutionary, he was still a man of culture and religious zeal for the gods of Babylon. He is sometimes styled the world's first archaeologist. Nabonidus is thus the last true king of Babylon and the father of Belshazzar, whom he constituted co-regent with him as he himself retired to Arabia. A lot of times you will have these kingdoms, and they will have a father and son ruling, and one is the co-regent. So in that transition period, to bring in the son, he would take on more and more responsibility. So it says the Nabonidus Chronicle was written after the capture of Babylon in 539 BC. Oh wait, I'm sorry. I skipped the part. It said he himself retired to Arabia, presumably to consolidate the weakening empire. The Nabonidus Chronicle was written after the capture of Babylon in 539 BC. Cyrus of Persia declares how he was able to take the city without a struggle, and describing his leniency toward the population, regards himself as an enlightened despot and execution of the will of the gods. His estimation of the character of Belshazzar is exceedingly low, not at all out of harmony with that represented by the biblical account. We just read about what Belshazzar was doing, acting a fool. In regards to the scriptural account, Belshazzar's miserable doom came about at the end of largely as a consequence of a drunken orgy held October 29, 539 BC. The feast of Belshazzar. Suddenly, the fingers of a man's hand appeared, writing in fiery letters a message which Belshazzar could not decipher, but which he still recognized as ominous. Following the failure of his advisors to decipher the cryptogram, upon the suggestion of Queen Mother, the venerable Hebrew prophet Daniel was summoned. He, after verbally castigating Belshazzar, interpreted the message: "Thou art weighed in the balances and art found wanted." Man, that is a heck of a thing to hear. I mean, you wear the crown and you're like, man, this is over. The judgment was swift and inevitable. Babylon fell to the Medo-Persians. Belshazzar was slain, and Darius, in the name of Cyrus, took the throne. Okay, so that lines up with history. Again, so when I'm saying kingdoms go and kingdoms go, you can line it up with history, brothers and sisters. Let's go back to Daniel. Daniel, the 2nd chapter, and read, because again, Daniel was a mighty prophet, and the Lord was showing him all the kingdoms, these last 4 Gentile kingdoms that would come. So now Nebuchadnezzar had a dream, and he needed somebody to show the dream and interpret the dream, and they had to go to the one that the Lord was dealing with. So he's going to tell them what this is all about. This is Daniel, the 2nd chapter. And again, kingdoms come and kingdoms go. Daniel 2 and verse 31, it says, Thou, O king, sawest, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. So he's telling them what he saw in his dream. He didn't, because one thing about Nebuchadnezzar, when he had this dream and he was troubled, he didn't want to just hear the interpretation. Because he said, y'all not about to lie to me about this one. I want to hear what the dream was. It's gone from me. Tell me the dream and the interpretation. And if you don't, I'm gonna kill all y'all. all the soothsayers and the magicians and the wise men. I'm killing all of you. You're supposed to know. But nevertheless, he says, this image, his head was of fine gold, his breast and his arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, his legs of iron, his feet part of iron and part of clay. Thou sawest till that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet that were of iron and clay, and break them to pieces. So now he saw this image, and it was comprised of various minerals. The head was gold, and the breast and his arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, his legs of iron, and the feet part of iron and part clay. Verse 35, then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken into pieces together, and became like the shape of the summer threshing floors. And the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain and filled the earth. What is all this pointing to? Let's keep reading. This is the dream, and we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king. So this is Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And so thou art king, art the king of kings, for the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom, power, and strength and glory. We just read about what was given to Nebuchadnezzar, and when he was talking to Belshazzar. Verse 38, and whosoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowls of the heaven hath he given into thine hand, and hath made thee ruler over them all. Thou art this head of gold. So now the head represents the gold. The golden head represents Babylon. It says, and after thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee. Okay, so that next one we understand is the Medes and the Persians. We read about how that kingdom ended, the Babylonian kingdom. Okay, so now after them came the Medes and the Persians. Then it says, so it says in verse 39, and after these shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee. That's after Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon. Then it says, and another king, third kingdom of brass. So now the third kingdom of brass was Greece. It says, which shall bear rule over all the earth. That one came, and Daniel prophesies further about that kingdom. Okay. And that kingdom started with Alexander the Great, and then it went further with his generals after he died, leaving no successor. Then it says, so it says in verse 39, and after thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee, and another kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron. For as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things, and as iron that breaketh all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise. The fourth kingdom, brothers and sisters, the one that emerged after the Greeks, was the Roman Empire. And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it of the strength of the iron, for as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay. What is that talking about? So it says, and as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And this is, brothers and sisters, is referring to what's happening in these last days, the reunification of the Roman Empire. See, the Roman Empire, people say it died in 476 AD, but it didn't truly die because you still had you always had this two heads of as far as leadership when it comes to the Roman Empire. You had the political rulers, right? But you also had like Caesar, but you also had the religious faction that ruled. And the religious faction, even though it's waned in power a bit, it kept it going to where they still, even now, you're seeing the reunification of the Roman Empire. Okay, so it says, and whereas verse 43, excuse me, and whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. So you're gonna have partly weak and partly strong. Verse 44, and in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom. See, kingdoms come and kingdoms go. And there's a kingdom that's coming that shall never be destroyed. And that's the one that the Most High is going to set up. And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. And the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. See, that's what's really coming. Right? People think that because something is one way, one day it's going to continue like that. No. Change is the only constant. And that is true when you look at these kingdoms. Look at Greece right now. Greece used to be a mighty nation. Not so much now. So people will say about the U.S. Last place, Revelation 11 chapter and verse 15, because when it's all said and done after the great tribulation, at the seventh, when the seventh angel sounds, it says in verse 11, Revelation 11 and 15, it says, and the seventh angel sounded, and there were great voices in heaven saying, the kingdoms of this world are become the kingdoms of our Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever. So kingdoms come and kingdoms go, but there's a kingdom that is coming that will last forever. With that, brothers and sisters, I thank you for your time.